Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today published her first novel, So Happy Together, when she was 74. Her essays have been widely published, and a COVID-themed one was a 2020 winner in the Center for Interfaith Relations Sacred Essay Contest. She holds a BFA in drama from the University of Arizona and an MSW from the Fordham University Graduate School of Social Service. She's the mother of two and grandmother of two and lives with one husband and two dogs on the coast of Maine. She is currently at work on a memoir. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Deborah K. Shepard.
Oh, thank you, Julia. First of all, I have to tell you, I love the idea of Authors Over 50. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Deborah. We're thrilled to have you. Our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Oh, my goodness. Well, my book journey is a little bit different because I actually wrote a first draft of this when I was in my early 40s. My marriage was unraveling. I had one teenager and one tween, and my creative spark had just sort of gone away. But one night I sat down at the word processor, so you can tell how long ago this was, and started writing a novel. And I kept writing and I kept writing. It took me about a year at night after my job and getting dinner on the table and getting the kids to bed, et cetera. And I wrote it on the kitchen table, right, with my word processor. And I was so naive about writing in those days. I thought, okay, I typed the end, and I had a stack like this, and I put it in a box. I found one New York publisher. I didn't even have an editor or anything. One New York publisher, and I sent it off to him in this box, and came back about 10 days later. I'm sure they never even opened it. And I thought, oh, this must mean I'm a terrible writer. And I put the book away in the back of my closet, and it stayed in one closet or another. We moved several places from year to year. And it sat for 30 years. And then I got my MSW. I was a social worker for many years. And then I retired. And a couple of years after I retired, I took a writing class. We have an organization called Maine Writers and Publishers Association. They give great workshops. So I took this workshop, and I came home and I said to my husband, I think I'm writing a novel. And he said, you remember, this is second husband, by the way. He said, do you remember that piece of juvenilia you wrote all those years ago? And he said, why don't you pull it out? Because maybe there's something in there you can use in the new novel and you won't have to work so hard. So I pulled it out, and I literally had not looked at it for 30 years. And I reread it, and I thought, this is not so bad after all. So I worked on it for about a year and a half. I worked with a developmental editor and a copy editor, and there you are, 74. I found a publisher, and it got published. So,
well, tell us more about that publishing journey. Did you search for an agent again? Did you decide?
Oh, I did.
Choose a hybrid, a small press?
Right. The first time I never even thought about an agent. I just sent the book off to a publisher, right? That's how naive I was about the whole process. This time, I knew there were the big five, and I knew there was self-publishing. I didn't know what was in between. So I sent it out to agents, and mostly they ignored it. And once in a while I got thanks, not for us. And then I did an in-person pitch with an agent who was a very young agent. It was probably about in her early 20s, possibly. And she said, I like this book, but I don't represent authors of historical fiction. And I said, historical fiction? This isn't historical fiction. This is during my lifetime. It's the 60s and, to the 80s. And she said, in publishing, that's historical fiction. So unbeknownst to me, I had written a historical fiction book. Anyway, after that, again, through the Maine Writers and Publishers Association, this was pre-COVID, there was a panel about different kinds of publishing. And I knew I didn't have the technology chops to self-publish. And I wasn't getting anywhere with the major publishing houses. But one of the people on the panel was talking about hybrid publishing. And I thought, you know what, this sounds like something I can do. If they'll have me, right? So I spoke to the woman who had talked about this, and she happens to live in my town. And she told me about She Writes Press, which is an all-woman publishing company. And it sounded right. So I sent my book in, and because it had already had a developmental edit and a copy edit, it was green-lighted for publishing. And that's how I got. And then there's so much more after that, right, in terms of the book journey, right?
Yes, and She Writes has an excellent reputation. They really provide partnership throughout your journey. I've heard they also match you up with a whole community of women writers, and it's quite a good experience.
That is I would say, number one is having my book in my hand, my published book, but right up there is that community, and it just it's changed my life. It really is so wonderful. And what's also great about the community is how many authors are first-time authors are over 50 in this group. I thought I was so special. That was 74, my first novel. And then I looked around and there are a whole lot of other women just like me, which is great.
Well, that's how this podcast started. I thought I want to celebrate all those people like me who have waited until retirement to write our first book, and people showed up. We're booked, many months out because so many people want to tell their publishing story after the age of 50.
Right. And it's quite a story for most of us. We had whole other careers and lives, many of us, before this. So.
But I think it's like swimming. I think we can do it the rest of our lives, because I'm interviewing a lot of people in their 80s and 90s who are writing beautiful work.
I know. As there's one woman in, I think she published the year before I did, but it was her third book. And she's wondering whether she should write a fourth book, and she's 90 something. So I expect to be writing for as long as I'm alive, I hope.
It's very inspirational to all of us. Well, tell us about the book, how it transformed from the book you had in the drawer to the published book. Did you take anything out? What changed?
Well, to start with, I was having, as I said, my first marriage was unraveling. I was having these fantasies of what if I'd made another choice? What would my life be like? And I decided, instead of actually running away from my life, I would write a story about a woman who did carry through with her, on her fantasy of this. So that's how it started. And then what happened afterwards, in terms of the 30-year gap, when I pulled it out, I had to work really hard, and I really knew so little about. Right, I just wrote. I knew so little about the building blocks of a book, So working with the developmental editor was probably the best thing I did. And what I didn't anticipate, though, was I thought I would go to her. She would say, "Oh, you need to do this instead of this." And that's not how it worked at all. And she gave me homework, and she made me read the Scene book by Sandra Schofield. And she gave me writing exercises, and I had to do all kinds of prompts. And some part of me was really rebelling, and whining. I don't want to do this. I just want to make my book better. But doing that made my book a whole lot better. And it took I worked with her for about 6 months until the book was ready to go out. And it was very funny because, I would present her a version and she'd say, "But what about the beats? And what about the this?" And I go, "What?" And then she said, at one point she said, "Nope, not a novel. You don't have an inciting incident." And I said, "What's an inciting incident?" I was really that night. And she explained the inciting incident. And I said, "Well, I just read this book. And it was just about this woman who was going through menopause. And so she took a road trip." And so my editor said to me, "What, you don't think menopause is an inciting incident?" So I saw the light, I think, and wrote a kick-ass inciting incident, I think.
Good for you. What is your writing routine? It sounds fabulous for those of us in 100-degree weather to be thinking about Maine and thinking that would be a wonderful place to write.
It is, but you know what? It's hot here. It's not as hot as in Texas, but it's been getting hotter and hotter over the years. When we first moved here, there was, maybe one day where you could have used air conditioning. Now it's a lot more than that. So,
how about your writing routine? Are you a morning person or a night person? Do you write every day?
I don't write every day. I wish I did write every day. When I'm writing a novel or when I'm writing a book, I do try to write every day. But in between, I kind of need to wait for inspiration. And so I write essays in between. And it's a genre I really like, because you write it, you work on it, and then it's done. And then you send it out or don't send it out. But there's a little more instant gratification for me.
Well, it's certainly a different format for you to have to be able to tell everything you want to in a short amount of space and make that inciting incident really important and a quick turnaround.
Right. And one of the things I've actually enjoyed most about writing essays is I write it, and then there are specific markets that want certain number of words. So I can cut, and it's the editor in me, that sort of likes to cut and see if I can still tell the story that originally was 1,000 words. And now this online magazine wants 500. So it becomes kind of a game, and it's fun.
Well, you probably did really well if you had a publicist who was assigning you all the essays that they do once your book is published.
And I did. And that, there were deadlines, and I did it. And it first of all, it was good publicity for the book, but it was also good discipline for me, because being retired, I hadn't had deadlines in years.
Well, tell us more about the challenges of publicity. Most of our writers would rather be sitting home writing than marketing themselves. Can you tell us post-publication what you've been doing, what worked, or maybe what didn't work?
Sure. You said most of us would rather be home writing. Yes, there were days when I thought I'd rather be having root canal than having to do this publicity, because it's so far out of my comfort zone. But I did have a publicist, and she was great at the hand-holding, and I had a social media consultant as well, because my 14-year-old grandson had to do my Facebook author page. So that's how untechy I am. So I'm getting more comfortable with Facebook, but so the social media consultant helped me with Facebook ads and things like that, and keywords, and all this vocabulary I'm adding, and there was a book book blog tour, which worked really well, I think, for me. It's hard to say. Did I sell a lot of books? I don't know, but I had a lot of the bloggers followers saying, "Oh, this looks like a book that I'd like to read." So we'll see on that. Funny for an introvert, which I know a lot of writers are, but what's most recently working for me and kind of in my comfort zone is meeting readers in person. I just came back from Bookstock in Woodstock, Vermont, with 9 other She Writes authors, and we had a part of a tent, and we sold our books and each other's books, and just talking to readers in person about my book. Now, your book and my book were both launched during the pandemic, so we didn't have that opportunity. So having that opportunity now is a really pleasant surprise. And the other thing I'm doing is our little town in Maine has a lot of authors. Maine seems to is a place where writers like to go. And we are selling our books at something called a little booth called Locally Grown Books at our farmers market every Friday. And there are 16 of us, and 2 of us, they're all women, 2 of us woman the table each Friday. And we have an opportunity to talk about, we sell each other's books and our books. We have an opportunity to talk about the books. And it's just so gratifying to me to be able to do this. So that's my kind of favorite kind of publicity. I don't know. I did sell 21 books in Vermont, which is pretty good, and sold 4 books the other day on, at the farmers market. So little by little, I've kind of given up the dream of having that bestseller. And when you look at the statistics, now I'm just having fun with it.
Well, I think that's the best thing to do. And then if anything else happens, that's just the icing on the cake. But I think it's so rewarding to talk to those readers who just accidentally found your book. They're not relatives. They're not friends.
Right, they're not sister authors.
No, they just stumbled upon your book and they loved it, and they write you about it or reach out to you. And I love the one thing that I think really made a difference during the pandemic was that we can Zoom into people's living rooms and meet with book clubs.
Right, which I did. I did one book club in person, but it was outside and we were all 6 feet apart, but we still were able to connect. It was really nice. And then I did another book club, Zoom, people in Philadelphia. So you wouldn't have those kinds of opportunities had it not been for Zoom and the pandemic, right?
Exactly. Well, tell us a little bit more about your book and then read a few paragraphs for us so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book.
Okay, great. Well, Caro Mills Tanner is 40. She's married to Jack. They're raising 3 children in the suburbs, but she suddenly realizes that she has lost her creative spark and her marriage isn't what she thought it might be. And so she starts having fantasies about an old love, her college love, Peter. And they were both drama students together and inseparable. And she has a nightmare. And it's about Peter. And she takes that as a sign that he still needs her. So this is pre-cell phone and pre-social media, so she doesn't even know if he still exists or is where he used to be. But she realizes that she needs to go and find him. And that's what my book is about. She takes the road trip. She drops her 3 kids at summer camp and takes off. And what she finds may not be what she was looking for, but it's a journey that I think a lot of us take in our head. It's about love. It's about friendship. It's about sexual attraction. It's about creativity. It's about reigniting the spark. All in there.
Well, let's hear some of it.
Okay. I'm going to read from the prologue. Tucson, Arizona, 1967. Peter never stuttered when he was on stage. Framed by a proscenium, he was as eloquent as Sirs Richard Burton, Laurence Olivier, and Alec Guinness put together, and could vanquish those plosives and fricatives and bilabials like Hamlet dispatching his duplicitous mother and murderous stepfather with a thrust of his sword. Offstage, Peter McKinley, first name starting with a plosive, last name with a bilabial, couldn't even introduce himself without grimacing and grunting and repeatedly pursing his lips. At first, it was painful to watch, but I got used to it. Except for that stuttering and his surprisingly wry sense of humor, you might not even notice he was there. He was a sweet, shy, soft-spoken, self-effacing, church-going college boy who blushed easily, was good to his mother, and rescued stray cats. But somewhere between the green room and the wings, he transformed. It wasn't just the makeup or the costume or the lights or all the theatrical abracadabra that I knew was just an illusion. It happened every time he stepped on stage. To me, he seemed broader and taller and more at home in his own skin. And did I mention brave? He didn't just play the part, he was alive in it. That blossom in my heart, I'll fling to you, armfuls of loose bloom, love, I love beyond breath, beyond reason, beyond love's own power of loving. Your name is like a golden bell hung in my heart. And when I think of you, I tremble, and the bell swings and rings, Roxanne, Roxanne, along my veins, Roxanne. Each night I hovered in the wings and held my breath as he declaimed these words to my stage rival. Each night he could have had me right then and there on those floorboards, curtain up or down, audience be damned. And then after the bows and the adulation, the cold creamed makeup removal and the costume change, swashbuckling Cyrano de Bergerac became sweet, shy, stuttering Peter McKinley again. I loved him in both his personas.
Gosh, that's lovely, Deborah.
Thank you.
Those descriptions are just wonderful. I could just see him and both of them actually in that scene.
Yeah, it was fun to write, and that was what I wrote. Actually, that was not part of the original book, right? So when I had to go back and write an inciting incident, that also popped in my head. So that was probably around my 5th draft or 6th draft.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Tell us, now that was fiction, but tell us more about the memoir that you're writing and what themes are running through your own life and into that manuscript.
Right. Well, everybody, because this is a first novel, everybody says to me, "Oh, is it about you?" And I have to give my caveat. There are pieces of my life in there, but it's fiction. It's a story. I never took a road trip. So now with a memoir, you can't really hide behind that. And I wasn't going to write it, but it's just started writing itself one day about, and this is the story of my first marriage, which is nothing like the marriage in So Happy Together, in that I was married to a man who was much older than I was. So this is the story of that. And when you write a memoir, there's so many things to consider. I mean, fortunately, I'm writing about things that happened 50 years ago. So I don't have to worry too much about people being portrayed in the book, because most of them are either elderly or not around anymore. I do have to think about my children, and I will run everything by them. And they're obviously, if there are things that they don't want, I'm going to cut them. But it's about a 20-year period of my life that I'm writing about.
So in memoir, you can choose different sections of your life. You don't have to start from birth to death.
That's right. Fortunately, it's not a biography. I mean, that's the difference between memoir. It's a slice of your life. It may be one day, it could be one day, or it could be 20 years or in between. And in many ways, it makes it easier. And in many ways, it makes it harder, because you have to really zoom in and look at this particular, maybe painful time in your life.
Well, I know that Brooke Warner, and she writes, they really champion memoir. Will you publish with them again?
I don't know. The one thing about hybrid, I'd like to think I could. One thing about hybrid publishing is there is an outlay of money at the up front. So I have to think about my budget this time. But it was in terms of a quality book. I'm just going to show it here. In terms of a community, it's a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful experience. Just have to think about the money.
Well, what do you think was the best money that you've ever spent as a writer?
Oh, the best money I ever spent as a writer was to find a developmental editor who taught me what I didn't know. I think that was pretty amazing. And right up there with is my publicist, who was just wonderful. So you can't do this in a vacuum. You need to have people around you who have the skills that you don't have. You may be a really good writer, but you don't know anything about publicity, or you don't know anything about social media. So fortunately, we have those wonderful people out there.
And I think writing our first book is a class in learning the craft and learning to write novels.
Definitely.
Well, Deborah, our writers over 50 are such a unique group. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
I do. And it's kind of the same advice I gave myself when I was 42 and I realized I was going to have to support my children, and I went back to school and I got a social work degree, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be 42 before, 44, 45 before I get this degree. And then I thought, I'm going to be 45 anyway. I might as well be at 45 with an MSW. So, if you have that book in you, or that essay, or that poem, let it out and do it. I think it's a cliche, but it is never too late. It's never too late to realize that dream. And even, if that dream means self-publishing, great, because there are people who've done wonderful work with self-publishing. If you're lucky enough to land an agent, fine. Most of us won't, but there are avenues for all of us to get our books published.
That's very true and very good advice. There are so many options out there for partnerships and to see our work in print.
Right.
We just want to thank you so much, Deborah, for being with us today. And we're proud of your work and wish you much success in the future. And we're just happy to know that you're now one of our authors over 50.
And I'm so happy to be one. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.